Hello. Hi, puppy. Waggy tail. You're hidden by the chat. If I adjust the camera like this, there you go. Now you're no longer hidden by the chat. You want a snack? Gib. Oh, happy Wednesday. I haven't been here for a week. By here I mean doing the stream, not like here in my house. I've been here. Bingo sheet, it's all buried over here. That's not the right one. That's an old sheet. Where's the current one? Oh, there it is. Whether or not we're actually going to fill any spaces in, it's been a little while since we have. It's Wednesday. Inabik. It's Wednesday. You want a snake? I say okay. Oh, happy Wednesday, Sharkies. How you doing? How has the past week been for you? Since we didn't do a stream on Friday, I haven't seen you since last Wednesday, where we left off on a cliffhanger. Sorry about that. I didn't think it was going to be this long. We kind of got the... I think we actually got the showing request, like maybe for that Friday, like just as I was finishing the stream or something on Wednesday. Oh no, more sickness. Sharkies have been having an unwell year so far. It's not great. I'm sorry. A friend of ours has caught the Roni for the first time, which is very unfortunate. They're really not enjoying the drippy nose that came with it. I didn't really sleep last night. I slept a little bit this morning for, I don't know, a few hours. Really ready for the winter to be over. Trees are starting to bud, but it was apparently snowing in Richmond today. We were out driving on Tuesday, yesterday, and this like intense hailstorm just sort of started. So we were driving and it's just bouncing off the car. It was piling up in the road, like the road was turning white with hail. But then we left the area that it was hailing in, and then it was just sunny. And then it was cold last night, and then apparently it was just snowing within the past like hour or two. Yeah. But yeah, we were out with the pup, the past few days, and buds are showing up on the trees. Trees are starting to bud. So, we're getting there, but yeah, winter is being tenacious. Unfortunately. Hmm. Yeah, we're at a pretty low elevation. We're pretty close to sea level. So I guess that makes sense. Yeah. Chilliwack is weird when it comes to weather. They get, I feel like, just much more extreme weather than we do closer to Vancouver. Because they'll get like much more snow in the winter, and then they get flooding in the spring, and well, and the fall. Yeah, and then they get much hotter days in the summer. Um, if it's like 32 degrees here, it might be like 37 degrees in Chilliwack. Mm, yeah, that's true. It just seems like as you go inland, the weather gets more extreme sometimes. They had accumulated 3 meters of snow. That was a nasty winter. Just like we got a lot of snow here too. Not to necessarily the same extent, but yeah, a couple of weeks ago. Yeah, that one. You remember that winter a few weeks ago? Ah, yes. Way back in 11 days ago. The distant past. Oh, yeah, that might have been where it was just, I think it was just like a temperature thing. I think we had like a tiny like chip in our windshield, and then it was super cold, and so of course we had the heat on in the car, and the windshield just went and cracked right from like one side to the other. That was while we were driving away from Cultus Lake. We had to replace that. Like, yeah, I think we had like a little rock chip on like one edge of the windshield, and then I think the temperature difference between it being so cold and then us like putting the heat on in the car just caused stress, and the whole windshield just, it was just like so abrupt. Mm-hmm. So I'm definitely going to keep tonight to be a little bit of a shorter one because I am quite tired, and I'm gonna get myself to bed earlier today. Hopefully get some good sleep and wake up a little early tomorrow, and then see if I can get a sleep schedule going. I had it for a bit, but it's a cycle for me. Like I am fairly like I'm self-diagnosed delayed DSPS, delayed sleep phase syndrome. I want to be awake at night and asleep during the day, or my body does. I don't want to be. I don't, because the world doesn't run on that schedule, and it's hard to get stuff done in the middle of the night. But yeah, if I am not really, really careful with managing my sleep, and even if I am really, really careful still, like it'll be like, okay, I'm falling asleep at 10 o'clock at night, falling asleep at 10, falling asleep at 10, and then the next night I fall asleep at 10:30, and then I can't fall asleep any earlier than that, and I'm waking up, a little bit later, and then I'm falling asleep at 11 and 12, and then it'll drift more and more like that until I can't fall asleep, as much as I try. Go to bed, do nothing, lay in bed with my eyes closed, and I'll just be awake all night until 5 a.m. And then I'll fall asleep at 5, and I won't want to wake up until like 1 or 2 in the afternoon. And then I can do that consistently. That's no problem. Fall asleep 5 or 6 a.m., wake up in the afternoon. That's easy for me to do. It's really hard for me to fall asleep at like 10 p.m. and wake up at like, 7 or 8 or whatever. It's it's been a lifelong problem. Definitely ever since at least like elementary school. So every now and then, my method of dealing with it is to just do one of these stay up all night so that I'm real tired when the next night comes around, and then fall asleep early, and then tonight'll be fine. Tonight I'll be able to sleep just fine, I'm sure, but tomorrow's the tricky day where I've got to make sure that I fall asleep around like 10 o'clock tomorrow. So that it sticks. Because if I don't do that tomorrow, then the whole thing's wasted. We watched some movies this week. We watched Glass Onion, the Knives Out sequel, sort of sequel. Sequel doesn't feel right because it was more like, comparing one James Bond movie to another sort of thing. It was not directly related to the first Knives Out movie in any way. It's just shared the same, Benoit Blanc? Is that his name? Is it Benoit? As the sort of primary protagonist. It was fun. We watched that, and then on Tuesday we went and saw the new Ant-Man movie. Yeah. Also played by Daniel Craig. I don't think that's why I said that. I was just trying to think of a series of movies that are all, sharing a character but not necessarily linked in story. And that was the best I could come up with. Because, it's not exact. Indiana Jones movies are sequels to each other in that it's all the same Indiana Jones. But James Bond isn't necessarily the same, James Bond in one movie doesn't necessarily have anything to do with James Bond in another movie. I don't know. Glass Onion and Muppet Movies is a trailer. What did I see? Last of Us, except it was Mario Kart or something? I don't know. Or Mario movie, except it was Last of Us? A Muppet Knives Out movie. All Muppets except for Daniel Craig. I saw some random person online, I think, at least someone that I don't know personally, said that they wanted I think it was they wanted a Muppet movie, a Muppet D&D movie, where the Muppets were playing, sitting around the table playing D&D, and then the actual shots of their characters, the transition to seeing their characters was all live action people or something like that, but still behaving in the way the Muppets dictate and maybe using the Muppets' voices. I'm not certain. I don't remember the details, but that seemed like it'd be entertaining. Hercule Poirot. Have you watched any of the Knives Out movies, Sharkies? Any of the two? I really enjoyed both of them. But I've got a little bit of a history with the first one, in that the first, because the first one was just called Knives Out, right? Farmhouse and I had seen it, and then we were watching it again with another friend at our house here, months or a year later or something like that, because our friend had never seen it, so we were showing our friend. And then I started just getting agonizing pain in my stomach, which, as it later turned out, was because of gallstones, and I had to get my gallbladder removed. And it just this. So I spent part of that movie just in horrible pain. Yeah. Yeah, Glass Onion was pretty on the nose. It was not subtle about who it was directly making fun of. It's just dumb. That was funny. Without spoilers, I did enjoy the new Ant-Man. Um, yeah, it was fun. It was good. Um, I think, is going to be one of those, like, it sort of introduces. There's a character that was in the Loki series that makes a reappearance in this, but is kind of introduced in a big way that will be important for future Marvel stuff. And Paul Rudd is just always great. I feel like I really, yeah, he's fun. Hmm. Yeah. So, it's been a week. We haven't gotten any bingo spaces for a while, largely because, these chapters have been all about Sinedra, and our bingo sheet doesn't really have anything about Sinedra on it right now. The ones that it did have are already stamped in. So we stopped mid chapter. We were partway through chapter 26. Yeah, it did have some campiness. It definitely had, I feel like it had the sort of baseline. It had the same sort of sense of humor as the previous Ant-Man movies. If you've watched any of those, they've all got like they're funny, um, but not as over the top as some of like Taika Waititi's directing stuff in the Marvel universe. Like, um, not as over the top as some of the like more recent Thor movies. Um, because while I personally did enjoy Thor: Love and Thunder, it did feel like it didn't know when it would be important to be serious. It was like any serious moment still had to be funny, um, which was, I think, kind of undermined the story a bit. Um, so this, I don't think, had that problem. This movie, it had funny moments and it had serious and, sort of intense moments, um, which I think is a better balance. Mm. Although there was no Lewis, none of the like crew. Now that I think about it, I didn't notice until just thinking about it just now. Anyways, yeah. So, did we read both chapter 25 and part of 26? I think we did, right? Uh, Barak's ship reaching the coast of Zandaria. That whole scene with Mandaralan riding down the coast parallel to the ship. Um, some pretty vivid imagery there. Um, Something I was thinking about just over the past day, sometime recently. Maybe it was when I was having a shower. Maybe it was shower thoughts. Um, Princess Sinedra's plot, right, to become the like figurehead of the army. It's interesting in that, you know, all the kings were like, look, she's not really going to be in charge. She's going to be a figurehead. She's just going to be there to rally people, and that was how they kind of got everybody on board. And I was kind of thinking like when that was happening, you know, when they're saying that like, oh, that's what they think. But the truth is that is actually kind of how things have gone so far, isn't it? Like she is just a rallying figurehead there to give speeches and inspire people, but she's not planning what they're doing. She's not behind the tactical decisions. That's being left to, you know, Rodar primarily and the other kings. And that makes sense, though. Like, it wouldn't make sense if she did take control. Like, her best position, the best place for her to be is as a figurehead inspiring everybody. Because she doesn't have the tactical military knowledge, you know, about supply chains and things like that. She's read history books and she's been educated, but not, you know, on the nitty gritty details of managing troops. Until she decided to recruit serfs by feeding them. Yeah, she didn't feel good about that, and but at the same time, she's kind of in the position of victory by any means necessary, I guess, right? And having a big drink of water, which is good. It's important to keep hydrated, puppy. You're just a little guy. You need to remember to drink water every now and then. Good boy. Good boy having a drink of water. Now have a nice dry rice cake. But yeah, I did find that a little interesting in that I feel like I would have, like, my default expectation, especially when they were like, she's just going to be figurehead, would be for her to get them all to agree to have her in charge and then actually take charge. Um, but I feel like she's being more intelligent by ignoring that um, maybe temptation. Yeah, the surf thing is definitely a complicated question. Like, they are starving, and realistically, with this war, you know, with this army marching through the kingdoms of the West, like recruiting everybody in its path and whatnot, you know, taxes are going to go even higher than they have been. Um, and so if the serfs aren't in the army itself, they're probably going to be even worse off than they were. Um, and I mean, they did, like, she told them, you know, you're joining the army and you're going to get fed. And they jumped at that opportunity, right? Like, they were like, I would lay down my life for you for giving me half a loaf of bread. So it's not like they were conscripted. It's not like they were, you know, slipped the king's piece in the bottom of their drink or whatever. Um, they volunteered, but it definitely feels pretty sketchy. I mean, just recruiting an army in general, I don't know. If you don't do it, then the bad guy's gonna come and kill everybody anyway, so gotta fight. But it's a lot of ethical questions come up through war, don't they? What is okay to do and what's not? So yeah, Sinedra has been giving speeches and then being physically ill. Her not being good at public speaking still, it seems a little unusual based on everything that we knew about her up to this point. And I mean, like, yeah, sure, anybody can have anxiety and social anxiety and whatever. Um, but it seems like you'd think she's been in court for so much of her life. Even if she's not talking, you'd think she'd just be kind of used to it, right? Like, I don't know. And she, like, so much of her personality is about out talking people, right? Which, yeah, one on one or whatever is different than in front of a crowd of 50 or 100 or whatever. But it's still, it feels a little odd that this thing. Yeah. I guess she's probably better with intimate groups of people that she can speak to face rather than in front of a crowd. And there's also a difference between having a conversation with people and giving a speech, where you're the only one talking and you don't have anything to respond to. You've just got to come up with paragraphs of things to say. But she has been managing, and apparently she's been doing it quite well, other than having to throw up afterwards. Then, yeah, she encountered Detton and Lammer in the forest after one of her speeches, and then she recruited them into the army. And then she really broke down about having done that. Polgara gave her some drugs to put her to sleep. Which, sometimes you just, I guess that's what you gotta do. Nervous with different types of performing for a crowd than others. I definitely, like, can get butterflies before, going on stage or whatever. But for the most part, as long as I have some idea about what I'm doing, um, I can handle it. Some of the stunt work I've had to do on like Supernatural and like Prison Break and things has been a little weird in that I have no idea what I'm going to be doing, like, up until the cameras are even rolling. Like, or like, there maybe as they're setting up the scene, I kind of figure it out, but like some of the stunts that we've had to do, it's just like I audition for one thing and then then like the day of they're telling me I'm going to be like climbing this wall and it's just kind of like, okay, I can do that. Whereas in my head I'm going like, I don't know very much about climbing. Other than, it's not something I practice regularly. And climbing a wall, like, I don't know. Or like riding around in the back of a truck. I don't know that I've had to do very many formal speeches, like in any kind of business situation. I've, spoken at funerals and things like that, and in those I just kind of wing it and hope for the best. Sometimes it works out and sometimes it doesn't. But also I feel like in those types of situations, generally speaking, people are pretty forgiving. But the most I've had to do for like speeches in front of like formal crowds, like in like professional situations, is like in school, in like a business communications class where I've had to give a speech or something like that. Yeah. Anyways, so mid chapter 26. Without knowing when it happened, Sinedra fell into a deep and dreamless sleep. The attempt on her life came the following morning. Is where we left off a week ago. And since it's 7:30 now, why don't I get started? Right, puppy? Why don't I get started? I don't know if you can tell, but he's got one of his paws. You can just see, if you can see the little bit by his cheek right here. He's got his paw, just like his toes sticking out from under his cheek. Alright. Ready? Have you got your copy? Do you know where we're at? The attempt on her life came the following morning. Her army was marked... What, you don't want me to start? I heard that. There's some people talking outside, and he just did a little like... Her army was marching south from Vauwassoon, passing through the sunlit forest along the Great West Road. The princess was riding at the head of the column, talking with Barak and Mandaralan, when an arrow, buzzing spitefully, came out of the trees. It was the buzz that gave Barak an instant of warning. "Look out!" he shouted, suddenly covering Sinedra with his great shield. The arrow shattered against it, and Barak, cursing horribly, drew his sword. Bran's youngest son, Olben, however, was already plunging at a dead run into the forest. His face had gone deathly pale, and his sword seemed to leap into his hand as he spun his horse. The sound of his galloping mount faded back among the trees. After several moments, there was a dreadful scream. Olben, maybe feeling a sense of responsibility? Shouts of alarm came from the army behind them and a confused babble of voices. Polgara rode forward, her face white. "I'm all right, Lady Polgara," Sinedra assured her quickly. "Barak saved me." "What happened?" Polgara demanded.
"Someone shot an arrow at her,"
Barak growled.
"If I hadn't heard it buzz, it might have been very bad."
Leldorin had picked up the shattered arrow shaft and was looking at it closely. "The fletching is loose," he said, rubbing his finger over the feathers. "That's what made it buzz like that." Olben came riding back out of the forest, his bloody sword still in his hand. "Is the Queen safe?" he demanded. For some reason, his voice seemed on the verge of hysteria.
"She's fine,"
Barak said, looking at him curiously.
"Who was it?"
"Emergo, I think," Olben replied. "He had scars on his cheeks."
"Did you kill him?"
Olben nodded. "Are you sure you're all right, my queen?" he asked Sinedra. His pale blonde hair was tousled, and he seemed very young and very earnest. "I'm just fine, Olben," she replied. "You were very brave, but you should have waited instead of riding off alone like that. There might have been more than one." "Then I'd have killed them all," Olben declared fiercely. "I'll destroy anyone who even raises a finger against you." The young man was actually trembling with rage. Thy dedication becomes thee, young Olban, Manderallen told him.
I think we'd better put out some scouts,
Barak suggested to King Rodar.
at least until we get out of these trees. Corodulan was going to chase all the Murgos out of Arundia, but it looks as if he missed a few.
Let me lead the scouting parties, Olban begged.
Your son has a great deal of enthusiasm,
Rodar observed to Brand.
I like that in a young man.
He turned back to Olban.
All right,
he said.
Take as many men as you need. I don't want any Murgos within 5 miles of the princess.
You have my word on it, Olban declared, wheeling his horse and plunging back into the forest. Leldoran V2? This time it's personal. They rode a bit more cautiously after that, and archers were placed strategically to watch the crowd when Sinedra spoke. Olban rather grimly reported that a few more Murgos had been flushed out of the trees ahead of them, but there were no further incidents. Yep. He, like father, like son. It was very nearly the first day of summer when they rode out of the forest onto the central Arendish plain. Sinedra, by that time, had gathered nearly every able-bodied Asturian into her army, and her hosts spread out behind her in a sea of humanity as she led the way out onto the plain. The sky above was very blue as they left the trees behind, and the grass was very green beneath the hooves of their horses. I don't know if I've mentioned this before. I've only noticed within the past book or so of this, but David Eddings has been using the word very a lot. Very blue and very green, and Olban was very earnest and very fierce, and, and I get it, but I feel like a thesaurus might help a little. Instead of the sky being very blue, why not have the sky be cerulean or something? I mean, you don't want to do it all the time, you don't want to overdo it, but I feel like there's just... It's something that's been sticking out to me a little bit in the writing, is a little too much very. Maybe I'm being picky, though. And where now, your majesty? Manderallen inquired. To Mimbrate, Sinedra replied. I'll speak to the Mimbrate Knights, and then we'll go on to Tolnedra.
I hope your father still loves you, Sinedra,
King Rodar said.
It'll take a lot of love to make Ran Borun forgive you for entering Tolnedra with this army at your back.
He adores me, Sinedra assured him confidently. Running out of adjectives. Yeah, it feels a little bit like that. King Rodar still looked dubious. The army marched down through the plains of central Arendia toward the capital at Mimbrate, where King Corodulan had assembled the Mimbrate Knights and their retainers. The weather continued fair, and they marched in bright sunshine. One sunny morning, shortly after they had set out, Lady Polgara rode forward and joined Sinedra at the head of the column. Have you decided how you're going to deal with your father yet? She asked. I'm not sure, the princess confessed. He's probably going to be extremely difficult. The Boruns usually are. I'm a Borun, Lady Polgara. I know. Lady Polgara looked penetratingly at the princess. "You've grown considerably in the past few months, dear," she observed. "I didn't really have much choice, Lady Polgara. This all came on rather suddenly." Sinedra giggled then as a thought suddenly struck her. "Poor Geryon!" she laughed. "Why poor Geryon?" "I was horrid to him, wasn't I?" "Moderately horrid, yes." "How were any of you able to stand me?" "We clenched our teeth frequently." "Do you think he'd be proud of me? If he knew what I'm doing, I mean." "Yes," Polgara told her. "I think he would be." "I'm going to make it all up to him, you know," Sinedra promised. "I'm going to be the best wife in the world." "That's nice, dear." "I won't scold or shout or anything." "Don't make promises you can't keep, Sinedra," Polgara said wisely. "Well," the little princess amended. "Almost never, anyway." Polgara smiled. "We'll see." Wow. The Mimbrate Knights were encamped on the great plain before the city of Vomimbre. Together with their men-at-arms, they comprised a formidable army, glittering in the sunlight. "Oh dear," Sinedra faltered, as she stared down at the vast gathering from the hilltop, where she and the Alorn kings had ridden to catch the first glimpse of the city. "What's the problem?" Rodar asked her. "There are so many of them."
"That's the whole idea, isn't it?"
A tall Mimbrate knight with dark hair and beard, wearing a black velvet surcoat over his polished armor, galloped up the hill and reined in some yards before them. He looked from face to face, then inclined his head in a polite bow. He turned to Mandorellen.
"Greetings to the bastard of Volmandor from Corodulin, king of Erendia." "You still haven't gotten that straightened out, have you?"
Barak muttered to Mandorellen.
"I have not had leisure, my lord,"
Mandorellen replied. He turned to the knight.
"Hail and well met, Sir Anderegg."
Oy, this guy.
"I pray thee, convey our greetings to his majesty, and advise him that we come in peace, which he doubtless doth know already." "I will, Sir Mandorellen,"
Anderegg responded.
"How's your apple tree doing, Anderegg?"
Barak asked, grinning openly.
"It doth flourish, my lord of Trelheim,"
Anderegg answered proudly.
"My care for it hath been most tender, and I have hopes of a bounteous harvest. I am confident that I have not disappointed holy Belgarath."
He turned and clattered back down the hill, sounding his horn every 100 yards or so.
"What was that all about?"
King Anheg asked his red-bearded cousin with a puzzled frown.
"We've been here before,"
Barak replied.
"Anderegg didn't believe us when we told him who Belgarath was. Belgarath made an apple tree grow up out of the stones of the courtyard, and that sort of convinced him."
"I pray thee," Mandorellen said then, his eyes clouded with a sudden pain. "I see the approach of dear friends. I shall return presently." He moved his horse at a canter toward a knight and a lady who were riding out from the city.
"Good man there,"
Rodar mused, watching the great knight as he departed.
"But why do I get the feeling that when I'm talking to him, my words are bouncing off solid bone?"
"Mandorellen is my knight." Sinedra quickly came to the defense of her champion. "He doesn't need to think. I'll do his thinking for him." She stopped suddenly. "Oh dear," she said. That sounds dreadful, doesn't it? King Rodar laughed.
You're a treasure, Sinedra, he said fondly. But you do tend to blurt out things on occasion.
Who are those people? Sinedra asked, curiously watching as Mandaralin rode to meet the couple who had emerged from the gates of Vomimbre.
That's the Baron of Voebor,
Dernick replied quietly.
and his wife, the Baroness Nerina. Mandaralin's in love with her. What? It's all very proper, Dernick assured her quickly. I didn't understand it at first myself, but I guess it's the sort of thing that happens here in Erendia. It's a tragedy, of course. All three of them are suffering terribly.
The good man sighed. Oh, look at that. Judgy Dernick. Maybe starting to look at things from a different perspective a little bit. So when he first heard about that, he was all, it's not right, it's not proper, they shouldn't do that. But now he's, oh, look at this, he's defending them a little bit. Character growth. Oh dear, Sinedra said, biting her lip. I didn't know, and I've treated him so badly at times.
I'm sure he'll forgive you, Princess, Dernick told her. He has a very great heart.
A short time later, King Corodulin rode out from the city, accompanied by Mandaralin and a score of armored knights. Sinedra had met the young king of Erendia several years before, and she remembered him as a pale, thin young man with a beautiful voice. On this occasion, he was dressed in full armor and a crimson surcoat. He raised his visor as he approached. Your Majesty, he greeted her gravely, we have awaited thy coming with great anticipation. Your Majesty is too kind, Sinedra replied. We have marveled at the stories of thy mobilization of our Asturian cousins, the king told her. Thine oratory must be wondrously persuasive to move them to lay aside their customary enmities.
The day wears on, Your Majesty, King Rodar observed. Her Majesty would like to address your knights. With your permission, of course. Once you've heard her, I think you'll understand her value to our cause.
At once, Your Majesty, Corodulin agreed. He turned to one of his men. Assemble the knights and men-at-arms of Mimbrate, that the Raven Queen may disclose her mind to them, he commanded. The army, which had followed Sinedra down through the plains of Erendia, had begun to arrive, and was flowing down onto the plain before the city in a vast multitude. Drawn up to meet that force stood the glittering Mimbrate Knights. The air crackled with suspicion as the two groups eyed each other. I think we'd better move right along, King Chohag suggested. An accidental remark out there could precipitate some unpleasantness we'd all prefer to avoid. Sinedra had already begun to feel sick to her stomach. The feeling by now, however, was so familiar that it no longer even worried her. Yeah, I guess, you still get that feeling, but as long as you get used to and can deal with it. A platform had been erected on a spot that stood midway between Sinedra's army and the armored knights of King Corodulin. The princess, accompanied by all her friends and the Mimbrate honor guard, rode down to the platform where she nervously dismounted. This is sort of interesting because it's not really like she needs to recruit the Mimbrate Knights, right? King Corodulin is already on their side, and the knights are knights. King Corodulin orders them to join the army, they join the army, right? I'm fairly certain that's how that would work. But it's better for them to be inspired, right? For them to be there because they want to be there, not just because they've been ordered to be there. Especially, not because they've ordered to be there despite the fact that they don't want to be. You want them giving their best effort. That's good. Use it. Let's see what Polgara says. Feel free to speak at length, Sinedra, Lady Polgara quietly advised. Mimbrates dote on ceremony, and they're as patient as stones if you give them something formal to watch. It's about 2 hours until sunset. Try to time the climax of your speech to coincide with that. Sinedra gasped. 2 hours? If you need longer, we can build bonfires, Dernick offered helpfully. 2 hours ought to be about right, Lady Polgara surmised. Sinedra quickly began mentally revising her speech. You'll make sure they can all hear me? She asked Polgara. I'll take care of it, dear. Polgara starts setting up the sound system. Out come the speakers and the equalizers and the microphone. Pyro Dernick, you're right. We can build bonfires. He didn't actually do it, but he was right there ready to. Does that count? Is everybody on board with that? It might be the last chance we get for a while. Pyro Dernick. We can build bonfires. I didn't even notice. Good catch. I'm stamping it. Dernick suggests fire. Yeah. Pyro Dernick. We have had Barak and Mandaralin, but I don't think Mandaralin has been dangerously overconfident, and I don't think Barak suggested violence. Oh, but if we get Mandaralin being dangerously overconfident, that gets us a bingo now, since we had Pyro Dernick. So, yeah. We've got a number of ways this could go. We're filling in a lot of spaces. Like, honestly, the number of spaces we've filled in without getting a bingo is actually kind of impressive. But Barak suggests violence is down here, and Mandaralin being dangerously overconfident is right here, which would give us the I column. So, we're close. We could get B, we could get I. There was another, was one away, wasn't there? Is that it? There are a few that are 2 away. I thought we had another that was 1 away. I guess not. If Barak suggests violence and then Mandaralin is dangerously overconfident, we'll get a double. So, keep an eye open for or an ear for what Barak's up to. He didn't suggest any violence, I don't think. He stopped violence. And he talked about an apple tree. He didn't actually suggest any violence. He's been, surprisingly peaceful. All right. Dernick offered helpfully. It would have been funny if that was hopefully. All right. Sinedra drew in a deep breath. All right then, she said. Here we go. And she was helped up onto the platform. Oh, look, It was not pleasant. It never was. But her weeks of practice in northern Orendia had given her the ability to assess the mood of a crowd and to adjust the pace of her delivery accordingly. As Polgara had suggested, the Mimbrates seemed quite willing to listen interminably. Moreover, here on the field at standing here on the field at Vomimbre gave her words a certain dramatic impact. Torak himself had stood here, and the vast human sea of the Angarak hordes had hurled themselves from here against the unyielding walls of the city gleaming at the edge of the plain. Sinedra spoke, the words rolling from her mouth as she delivered her impassioned address. Every eye was upon her, and every ear was bent to her words. Whatever sorcery Lady Polgara used to make the Raven Queen's voice audible at the farthest edge of the crowd was clearly working. Sinedra could see the impact of what she was saying rippling through the hosts before her like a breeze touching a field of bending wheat. And then, as the sun hovered in golden clouds just above the western horizon, the little queen moved into the climactic crescendo of her oration. The words pride, honor, courage, and duty sang in the blood of her rapt listeners. Her final question, "Who will follow me?" was delivered just as the setting sun bathed the field with flaming light, and was answered with an ear-splitting roar as the Mimbrate Knights drew their swords in salute. Perspiring heavily in her sun-heated armor, Sinedra, as was her custom, drew her own sword in reply, leaped to her horse, and led her now enormous army from the field. "Stupendous!" she heard King Corodulin marvel as he rode behind her.
"Now you see why we follow her,"
King Anheg told him. "She's magnificent," King Corodulin declared. "Truly, my lords, such eloquence can only be a gift from the gods. I had viewed our enterprise with some trepidation, I confess it, but gladly would I challenge all the hosts of Angarak now. Heaven itself is with this marvelous child, and we cannot fail."
"I'll feel better after I see how the legions respond to her,"
King Rodar observed.
"They're a pretty hard-bitten lot, and I think it might take a bit more than a speech about patriotism to move them."
Sinedra, however, had already begun to work on that. She considered the problem from every angle as she sat alone in her tent that evening, brushing her hair. She needed something to stir her countrymen, and she instinctively knew what it must be. Quite suddenly, the silver amulet at her throat gave a strange little quiver, something it had never done before. Sinedra laid down her brush and touched her fingertips to the talisman. "I know you can hear me, Father," she heard Polgara say. A sudden image rose in Sinedra's mind of Polgara, wrapped in her blue cloak, standing atop a hill with the night breeze stirring her hair.
"Have you regained your temper yet?"
Belgarath's voice sounded wary. Haven't had to do his voice for a little bit. A little bit of Joan of Arc symbolism. They didn't need the drunk guy to start the cheer this time, yeah. I was thinking about that too, but I'll finish this chapter first. We'll talk about that some other time. What are you up to?
"At the moment, I'm up to my ears in drunk Nadraks. We're in a tavern in Yar Nadrak."
I might have guessed. Is Garion all right?
"Of course he is. I'm not going to let anything happen to him, Pole. Where are you?
At Mimbrate. We've raised the errands, and we're going on to Tolnedran in the morning.
Ranboroon won't like that much.
We have a certain advantage. Senedra's leading the army.
Senedra?
Belgarath sounded startled. It seems that was what the passage in the Codex meant. She's been preaching the errands out of the trees as if she owned them.
What an amazing thing.
Did you know that the southern Murgos are already gathered at Rakgoska?
I've heard some rumors.
It changes things, you know.
Perhaps. Who's in charge of the army?
Rodar.
Good. Tell him to avoid anything major as long as possible, Paul, but keep the Angarax off my back.
We'll do what we can. She seemed to hesitate for a moment. Are you all right, Father? She asked carefully. The question seemed important for some reason.
Do you mean, am I still in full possession of my faculties?
He sounded amused.
Garion told me that you were worried about that.
I told him not to say anything.
By the time he got around to it, the whole question was pretty much academic.
Can you still...
Everything seems to work the same as always, Paul,
he assured her. Give my love to Garion.
Of course. Don't make a habit of this, but keep in touch with me.
Very well, Father. Ah. Mending a little bit. The amulet under Senedra's fingers quivered again. Then Polgara's voice spoke quite firmly. All right, Senedra, the sorceress said. You can stop eavesdropping now. Guiltily, Senedra jerked her fingers from the amulet. Eavesdropping? The next morning, even before the sun came up, she sent for Barak and Dernick. I'm going to need every scrap of Angarak gold in the entire army, she announced to them. Every single coin. Buy it from the men if you have to, but get me all the red gold you can lay your hands on.
I don't suppose you'd care to tell us why,
Barak said sourly. The big man was surly about being pulled from his bed before daylight. I'm a Tolnedran, she informed him, and I know my countrymen. I think I'm going to need some bait. The equivalent of picking up the other phone on the landline and breathing as quietly as possible. Wow. There's something that hasn't been a part of my life since I lived with my parents. I have never had a landline since moving out. I don't think I have even once, and I've never had cable either. I'm pretty sure. At least not that I've paid for. There might have been somewhere I lived that just sort of kind of came with cable. But I'm pretty sure since moving out, I've just always just used a cell phone. Even before it was really a smartphone. Although I suppose by the time I moved out, I might have had, like, an early smartphone. You had a phone in your room, but it was just the same line as the rest of the house. Yeah, oh yeah. Actually, I don't think I had a phone in my room. I had a TV in my room, an old, had to change the dial. And it had 13 channels on the dial. I picked up some British stuff occasionally, so I watched some late-night British TV occasionally.
but and when I turn it off, it would kind of go like, you know, it would do that like beep thing, right? And then the center of the screen for like an hour afterwards would glow this like dull green, which was kind of eerie in the dark of my room when I was going to sleep. Hmm. Yeah, I might have had cable somewhere included in rent, but I'm not certain, and I don't know if I've gone out of my way to hook it up ever. Remember when using a coaxial cable was a frequent part of like hooking up a game system or something like that. Like with Super Nintendo, having to use the like coaxial splitter, and the cable goes in on one side, and then the Super Nintendo goes on the other, and then the output to the TV. You have to screw them on. You've really only watched cable in hotels in the last 10 years. It's been on at my parents' house when I've been there. And it's shocking how much of it is commercials. Like, the commercials go on and on and on to the point where you forget, you know, that there's actually a movie on TV or whatever. Yeah. We watched a little Star Wars and a lot of commercials. Yeah. It's honestly shocking. Like, I don't know. I guess it feels like there are fewer and fewer customers, and they want to maintain the same level of advertisement viewership, so they're just balancing the decrease in customers to the increase of commercials to pay, you know, to bring in the money or whatever. Yeah, it's it's interesting, these things where you go like, ah, yes, the kids don't know about this basic stuff that we had to deal with. It's weird. It's weird, kids being born after X or Y or Z. We have to watch what other people decided would be on. Seeing kids be like confused when something isn't a touch screen. Hmm. Reminds me, I need to figure out how to play my own music in the car again. My old method doesn't work anymore. Though we do usually just listen to satellite radio. Or at least few commercials, depending on what and where you're watching. There are definitely problems with streaming services. Like, it feels like it is regressing. Like, there was, you know, cable was down here, and then a lot of like pirating and stuff, and then streaming services started to be a thing, and that was actually getting to be pretty good. And then they started splitting and, you know, dividing the content between more and more services, and now it's like anytime you want to watch a show, you have to figure out what service it's on, which is not an easy task. And it's just, and they're all like, it's just every, you know, year there's more services that you need to subscribe to. I feel like, I don't know, not to advocate paying for that, but if you spend enough time on the tubes of you, then a premium account might be worth it just to get rid of the ads. And, you know, like, the less time I can spend watching ads, the better. And I feel like, I guess, I probably watch enough YouTube where it's probably almost, I don't actually know how much it costs for, you know, a year of premium. But depending on that, there's probably a certain point where it's like, if I don't have to see any more random, like, ads in French or, you know, A&W ads and, like, banking stuff and, just so much nonsense. Like, every now and then I'll get, like advertisements on YouTube that are fully in French or Chinese or something. And I'm like, I don't know why you think I speak these languages. I mean, I live in Canada, but I don't speak French fluently enough to understand your French Tim Hortons commercial. Yeah, I don't think I will ever. I mean, unless something unforeseeable to me happens and suddenly, for some reason, cable is the way to go, I don't think I'll ever have a cable subscription. Maybe at some point I'll get an internet package and they will be like, you get cable whether you want it or not. It's just part of your internet subscription or something like that, in which case I probably still won't plug it in. They always try to sell me on it when signing up for a new phone plan or something. Alright, well, I am... Oh yeah, not at all. Cable's so expensive. I mean, I feel like that's just transformed a little bit to a random video coming up on your, you know, social media feed and going like, oh, look at this. You know, sure, it's shorter and it's not a full movie, but it's a similar experience. It's just transformed. Oh, streaming bundles, I see. I thought you were talking about cable. Yeah. All right, well. This was fun. Right, puppy? Say goodnight to everyone. Or say, snack. We do have a house showing on Friday, but it's earlier in the day, so unless we get another showing booked for the same day, I should be here on Friday, I believe. And I don't think we actually have any open house planned for this weekend. A little bit of a break, I guess. So yeah. Hopefully I will see you then. But have a good night. Hope everybody sleeps well, including me. I hope everybody recovers from any lingering illness. And yeah, I'll see you on Friday. Have a good rest of your week. Good night, everybody. Thank you. I will do my best.